So this career path, actually, it's one of those things when you start out when you're young, you have a vision of what it is you want to do, and life typically never pans out to be. So when I was growing up, I actually wanted to be an architect. And then I ended up going to university to study electrical and electronics engineering, which is a little bit aligned because of the, construction industry that I was interested in getting in. But at the time that I was graduating, the whole internet boom at the time was just coming up. And I had quite a bit of interest into that. And I ended up actually starting to work for Microsoft, in Kenya. And I was a channel and marketing manager, actually responsible, and this is going to show my age, unfortunately, of rolling out Windows 95. I'm sure nobody remembers that anymore, when everybody was queuing and we used to have it on a big CD. But I think for me then that was the interest, that came in, and then further starting to work with telecommunications. So incidentally, I was meant to join Standard Chartered much earlier and come in to look after digital banking. But at the time, because the role required a move to Dubai, and for family reasons, I wasn't ready at the time, I didn't join. And then later on came back and joined the bank looking after branded marketing with quite a big focus on digital marketing. So for me, I've never felt that, and maybe it was because of part of my schooling and in university, having taken, what was then deemed to be a technical course. When I look back now, my daughter's in university. I think majority of the students who are taking engineering courses or computing courses are women, right? So things have changed. But I had an opportunity then to engage quite a bit with quite a number of the female counterparts. Actually, in my class of 30, we only had 2 ladies at the time. So I think maybe for me, it was a preparedness of later on coming into work and being able to, work and engage with men. But the interesting thing that you will find in Standard Chartered is that we're very, very open and alive to the whole diversity and inclusion. So I never feel like I'm a woman. I come in as a person who's adding, value to the bank and being recognized and rewarded for that as well. I say leaders are born. I don't think you become a leader. So in that, I believe anyone can be a manager. You come in because there's certain activities that need to be done, which you can do. But I think leadership is much more about people providing what? An energy, a direction, innovation, where it's something different that people didn't think about. So I see leaders as those people who break barriers and who are not, they're not scared or they're not afraid to test existing models or to come up with new things. So for me, normally I then define, my measure of leadership will be that. I think it's the change from having come from a very strong technical IT background, which formed actually a larger part, will be 18 years. Actually, it's going to be 22 years of work experience on the 1st of July, which is coming up very soon next weekend. I think into banking and what my perception of banking would have been compared to what the whole telecommunication world was. So I was actually coming in, and I also said as a challenge to the bank, because I'd also been a client, and I wanted to know what was it in the back of banking in terms of making sure that my needs were being met in a better way. So I was also coming in a vested interest. Why are you taking so long to process my personal loan or mortgage and everything? And I found it to be very interesting in the sense that the way you have to still be, a thought leader and developing and doing a lot of things like we are now doing in the digital space to meet your requirements, but the very also strong regulatory requirement that exists in the back end, which we typically didn't have in a lot of the other organizations where I worked. You were able to really come out very quickly as a fast mover, whether it was Google or whether I worked in Safaricom, which is a Vodafone company in Kenya. So actually very exciting. So Standard Chartered has been one of those where I was almost literally given an open book to come and try out, different things. I'm sure you'd have heard and you've seen, especially from like our local CEO, Shazad Dada, talking about us being digital by design by 2020. So I came into the bank in, 2014, when this was a very strong digitization agenda. And the challenge then given to me and my team was, how are we going to make sure that we're going to bridge from messaging to the clients in a clever way that would bring them on board to adopting, the digital way or the online way of operating? And how would we also make sure that we're getting them to be able to do an element of self-service as well? Because you've seen that. We're seeing that much more and more with our younger, emerging, affluent clients. Nobody wants to go to a branch anymore. So it was also managing those, inherent fears that people also had. Is my money going to be secure if I'm doing this thing online? Am I making sure that I'm keeping my password safe? Is the bank protecting me in terms of those transactions that I'm doing? So for me, I think that's been one of those like very exciting things to do. I think, again, using the Standard Chartered example, so this had made me have to relocate, from Kenya, which is originally where I'm from, to Dubai. But my family, my husband is an airline pilot and could not move. So actually, I was telling my team it's been sort of the most difficult, I think, and a challenging decision to have made, to have been away from home, given that I know that I'm still very much the primary caregiver to my children, to the household. But I think, just that element of balancing being away from home and making sure that I'm delivering, at an optimal level with the bank, and also making sure that back home in Kenya, some 3,000 miles away, that everything is still going okay. I think so, most definitely. And actually, thanks to the bank for me as well, because I'm able to spend a week every month back home. So I work out of the Kenya office, which again is advantage of Standard Chartered having presence in almost 70 countries, globally, and with the whole digitization agenda. I can literally almost work, anywhere where I would be. But I think there's a lot of strides that I can see companies doing. And even here locally, we've done where I think maybe we're the ones giving probably the longest maternity leave of now 5 months, and a woman can take that. We recently last year launched Flexi Place and Flexi Time, where you could also choose the hours of work that you wanted to come that then would fit, especially for women, if you had young children or maybe older parents. Some of us are also living with our parents and need to be able to take care of them. Actually, people say the millennials by 2030, I think, will be working from everywhere. They'll be working in the park.
Yeah.
They're working from anywhere they will sit. So I think there's big strides being made towards that. I'm one of those who's also very fair to the men. And I say it's not just about women. So I think anything that we're giving, because my husband has now had to become the primary caregiver, right? And luckily for him, his employer is also making concessions for that, where he's able then to spend more time with our kids at home, while I'm away. But something that we realized that was actually impacting or hindering quite a bit of growth, particularly in some of our upcountry areas, was this preventable blindness. So you find, especially for children under the age of 5, we went around when we checked, especially with our partners who help us around our Seeing is Believing, efforts that we do as part of community engagement. Then you're finding very many children who were unnecessarily becoming blind, which meant that they were then putting a burden on their parents and the wider community. So the big change that I've seen for us in Standard Chartered, and then through our partners as well, Save the Children and all that, when we've gone into some of these areas and been able to, through the fundraising activities we do, through Seeing is Believing, just having these cataract surgeries that are being done on these children, that we're saying is then just prolonging their productive life, which means they can go to school as normal as the children will be able to do. They can help out with parents, they can do all these things and grow into normal productive adults. I think for me is that the opportunity that we're doing to make sure that we're having, people who will be able to live their lives in the fullness.